The building of Novatech Interstellar stood tall like a silver blade cutting through the sky, its walls smooth like glass and its logo glowing in sharp white letters. Inside, everything was clean, cold, and silent, except for the light tapping of heels on the marble floor. A young alien girl named Jira stepped into the lobby, her heart beating fast in her chest. She wore a simple tribal outfit, long brown cloth wrapped neatly around her, with a handmade sash decorated with beads and threads around her. Others turned to look, then laughed quietly among themselves. At the front desk sat Narix, a tall alien with shining blue skin and perfect corporate wear. Narix raised an eyebrow and said loudly, "Did you get lost on your way to a museum? Or is this your fashion statement?" A few more laughs followed from other waiting candidates, all dressed in modern suits with glowing cuffs and shiny digital badges. Jira didn't answer. She simply bowed slightly and walked to the waiting area. She sat on the edge of a smooth glass bench, holding her small pouch tightly. Inside it was her grandmother's good luck charm, a crystal tied with thread. Narix looked at her again and said, "Just letting you know, the human CEO is very serious about professionalism. Don't cry when he throws you out." Jira looked down, silent, calm on the outside but shaking inside. One by one, the candidates went in for interviews, and one by one, they returned with disappointed faces. Some whispered, "The human's impossible." Another said, "He rejected me in 3 minutes." Jira watched the doors, waiting, until she was the only one left. Suddenly, Narix tapped her desk and smirked. "Well, Jungle Girl, looks like you're the last meal on the table." But in the security room far above the lobby, Mr. Daniel Riker, the human CEO of Novatech, sat alone in front of several screens. He had been watching them all, but now he focused on the quiet girl in tribal clothes. He zoomed in, studied her posture, her hands, her eyes. She was different. She wasn't nervous like the others. She looked like she didn't belong here, yet didn't seem to care. Riker pressed a button and said into the mic, "Send her in. Right now." Narix's smirk vanished. "Well, what? Are you sure?" The voice replied, "You heard me." Jira stood up as the doors opened automatically. She walked past Narix, who sat frozen, eyes wide. The corridor to the CEO's room was long, silent, and filled with glowing panels. At the end, a large door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a simple but powerful room. One desk, one chair, and a tall man standing with his hands behind his back. Mr. Riker turned slowly, his sharp eyes looking straight into hers. He was older than she expected, gray at the temples, strong jaw, and a deep scar on his neck that looked like it came from battle. "Not business. Sit," he said calmly. Jira sat quietly, placing her pouch in her lap. He looked at her outfit and asked, "You know how many suits I saw today?" Jira shook her head. "No, sir." He smiled a little. 27. All expensive, all fake confidence, all useless. He pointed to her pouch. "What's that?" She opened it slowly and showed him the crystal. "My grandmother's charm. She told me it keeps lies away." Riker raised his eyebrows, surprised, then sat down. "And your outfit?" "It's woven by my tribe," she said. "Each thread tells a story of survival. We wear our history so we don't forget who we are." Riker leaned back in his chair and said nothing for a moment. Then he spoke softly. "You know what I see when I look at you?" Jira stayed silent, unsure what to say. "I see honesty," he said, "and strength that doesn't need to shout." Outside, Narix waited by the desk, trying to hear what was happening. The doors suddenly opened again. Riker stepped out with Jira walking beside him. He turned to Narix, his voice cold now. "You laughed at her?" Narix blinked. I was just..." Riker raised a hand. "You're suspended for a week. Reflect on what professionalism means." He turned to the rest of the staff who were watching. "Let it be known she's hired." Gasps echoed across the lobby. Jira looked shocked, her hands trembling, but Riker gave her a nod. "Start tomorrow." "Be ready," he said and walked away. Jira stood there, her grandmother's charm glowing faintly in her pouch, as the world she thought would reject her just opened its doors, and in that moment, everything changed. The next morning, the Novatech building seemed quieter. People whispered in corners, watching every movement of the new girl, the alien who wore cloth instead of chrome, beads instead of badges. Jira entered through the same front door, but this time, her steps were steady, her eyes forward. Narek sat behind the reception desk again, but he didn't speak, didn't smirk, didn't look at her. He had learned a hard lesson in public yesterday, and the memory still burned on his skin. Jira walked straight to the elevator. A few junior employees watched her, wide-eyed, then turned away quickly, unsure if they should stare or salute. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, Mr. Riker was already waiting. No guards, no assistants, just him, standing with a coffee in one hand and a data slate in the other. "On time," he said, nodding. "I like that." Jira gave a small bow. "You said to be ready?" "I did," he replied, then pointed to a hallway behind him. "Come. I want to show you something." She followed silently, her feet making no sound on the soft flooring. They entered a room filled with glowing data pillars, old storage units stacked floor to ceiling, untouched for years. "This," Riker said, "is where we keep records too old or unimportant for the main network." He turned to her. "But you said something yesterday. You said your people believe the past still speaks." Jira nodded. "Yes, we learn from patterns, from forgotten things. That's why we remember our stories." Riker smiled faintly. "Then this will be your job." He handed her a small handheld scanner. "One file at a time. Scan them, read them, understand what's worth keeping. I trust your instincts." Jira blinked, confused. "You want me to decide?" "You see differently than the rest," Riker said. "That's exactly why I hired you. Downstairs, word was spreading fast." "How did she get up there?" someone asked. "She's just a tribal girl." Another whispered. "I heard Riker personally walked her out after hiring her." Jealousy turned into anger in some hearts, especially in Narek's. Watched the elevator light blink as it moved higher and higher. "Something's not right," he muttered to himself, fingers clenching his desk edge. Upstairs, Jira had already begun. She touched the first data crystal. It flickered weakly, projecting an old log full of missing pieces. Lines of forgotten code appeared in front of her eyes. But some symbols felt familiar. Her grandmother once carved similar shapes into the stones near their home. Warning signs, ancient tech markers. She leaned closer, heart racing. Why would my tribe's code be here? File after file she worked. Hours passed like minutes. Riker had left her alone, trusting her fully. One file in particular stood out. It was labeled in red. "Deactivated, trial failed, do not reboot." Jira hesitated, then touched it. Oh. Strange pulse ran through her hand and a low hum filled the room. Suddenly a soft voice echoed from a speaker in the ceiling. "Unauthorized access detected. Stand by for lockout." The lights dimmed and the doors started to close. Jira gasped and tried to pull her hand away, but the file had already begun opening. Images flashed, old video logs from 300 years ago, showing humans and aliens together, building something, coding something, then screaming, then fire, then the logs ended. Her hands trembled. What had she just seen? Riker returned minutes later after being alerted. He stepped in and saw the dim lights, the open red-labeled file, and Jira standing in the middle, frozen. He didn't yell, didn't panic. Instead, he stepped closer and asked, "What did you find?" Jira turned to him, voice shaky. "Sir, I think your company is built on something ancient, dangerous." Riker's expression changed. Not fear, not anger, curiosity, and something else, something like recognition. He looked at the file and said quietly, "I thought it was lost." Jira stared. "You knew?" "I knew there were secrets buried here," he replied. "But I didn't know someone like you would uncover them so fast." She lowered her head. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean..." Riker raised a hand. "Don't apologize. You did what no one else could." He paused, then added, "That's what I meant yesterday when I said, you mocked her. I want her." He looked toward the darkened system and spoke with a serious voice. "And now, I think I know why fate brought you here. Down below, Narek saw the system flicker, red lights pulsing briefly from the top floor. He narrowed his eyes and muttered, "This isn't over." Jira stood beside the human who had seen past her appearance, past the laughter, past the cloth, and for the first time she realized she didn't just belong here. She was needed. The first official morning of Jira's job at Novatech came faster than she expected. She woke before the city lights dimmed and tied her tribal sash carefully, the beads clicking softly as she adjusted them. The pouch with her grandmother's crystal hung from her side, its glow faint but steady. She whispered to herself, "I will not fail," and walked out. By the time she reached Novatech, the lobby was already buzzing with employees rushing to their stations. This time no one dared laugh, though many still whispered, pointing at her when they thought she wouldn't notice. Narek looked up from the reception desk, his eyes sharp, his smile fake. "Well, look who's back. The boss's little project." Jira ignored him, her steps steady as she entered the elevator. When the doors closed, Narek's smirk disappeared, and he muttered under his breath, "She won't last." Upstairs, Riker was already at his desk, stacks of digital reports floating in the air before him. He looked up when she entered, gave a short nod. "Good. You're early again." He handed her a small tablet. "Your task is simple. Go to the lower archive, organize the forgotten tech files, and make sense of what's useful. No one touches that place anymore. It's a graveyard of failed ideas." Jira accepted the tablet with both hands. "I will do my best." "Not your best," Riker corrected. "Do what only you can do. That's why you're here." His voice was calm but carried a weight that made her heart race. The lower archives were unlike any part of the building she had seen. Dust clung to the glowing panels, and old shelves lined with forgotten tech pieces stretched endlessly. Humming machines sat half dead, their lights blinking faintly as if begging for attention. Jira moved slowly, her fingers brushing against ancient devices, some cracked, some humming with dangerous energy. She began scanning and sorting just as Riker had asked. Hours passed in silence until she reached a far corner, where one small console flickered strangely. It was weak, unstable, its screen broken and covered with scratches, but behind the broken glow, something pulsed. She crouched down, pressing her hand against the side, and the machine suddenly whined awake. Lines of corrupted code spilled across the screen, symbols mixed with words she barely understood, yet her eyes widened, for hidden between the codes she saw patterns. Patterns she knew, symbols her grandmother used to carve into rocks to keep away dark machines, as she used to call them. Her breath caught. "It's the same." She touched the screen gently, and the console sparked at once. The entire room's lights flickered, then dimmed. The archive came alive. Machines buzzing, shelves trembling, alarms blinking red. Upstairs, technicians shouted, "Power spike in the lower archives." System glitch detected. Security scrambled, not knowing what triggered it. Narek smirked from the desk. Of course it was her. Down below, Jira panicked as the machines whirred louder, screens flashing warnings in every language. System corruption detected. Lockdown sequence initiated. Doors around her began to seal shut, trapping her inside. She gripped her pouch desperately, whispering, "Please, guide me." The crystal glowed faintly, and she remembered an old chant her grandmother had once taught her when fixing broken tools. It wasn't just words, it was a rhythm, a pattern, something that calmed machines. With trembling hands, she tapped the console in the same pattern, almost like drumming. Beep, 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 beep. The screen responded, its glitches slowing, the corrupted code hesitating. Then suddenly the system froze, the alarm stopped, and the archive lights returned to normal. Jira collapsed to her knees, breathing heavily, her heart hammering. She whispered. It listened. Minutes later, the door hissed open and Riker stormed in with 2 engineers. "What happened?" he demanded, scanning the room. One engineer rushed to the console. "Sir, this system should have been deactivated decades ago. Something triggered a chain reaction. Could have fried half the network." Riker's eyes snapped to Jira, who was still kneeling on the floor, her pouch clutched tightly. He walked closer, voice low. "You stopped it?" Jira nodded weakly. It was using old symbols. My people's symbols. I remembered them, and I stopped it. The engineer stared in disbelief, whispering, "That's impossible." She stabilized a system we couldn't even touch. Riker's sharp gaze softened, but only slightly. He extended a hand to help her up. "Good work," he said simply. Jira hesitated, then placed her trembling hand in his, letting him pull. Her to her feet back upstairs, rumors spread like wildfire. The tribal girl fixed a core glitch? No way, that system was untouchable. Maybe that's why Riker chose her. Narix heard it all and his jaw tightened. He clenched, his fists under the desk, whispering through his teeth, "She won't outshine me. Not for long." In the CEO's office later, Riker looked out the tall glass windows, his reflection cold and thoughtful. Behind him, Jira stood quietly, her pouch glowing faintly. "You didn't just save a file today," Riker said. "You saved Novatech from collapse." Jira lowered her head. "I only did what I knew, sir." Riker turned, his voice calm but serious. "No, you did what no one else could. And now, I want you to go deeper. There are more secrets buried in this company than anyone imagines. Secrets that could destroy us. Or save us." Jira's eyes widened as her hand tightened on the pouch. She nodded slowly. "I will go deeper." Riker gave a small smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Good. Then your real work begins now." And somewhere in the silent, glowing halls of Novatech, a long-forgotten machine flickered back to life, its coded whispers echoing faintly, waiting for Jira to hear them. The air in the lower archives was still thick with mystery. Jira returned the next day, earlier than usual, even before the cleaning drones began their silent rounds. She held a small energy lamp in one hand, and in the other, her grandmother's pouch. Though she had calmed the glitch yesterday, something deep in the system had awakened, and she could feel it. Like a heartbeat under the floor, she took a deep breath and whispered, "Show me what needs to be seen." Using the handheld scanner Riker gave her, she moved past rows of tech modules and data slabs, following a faint signal she couldn't explain. It was like something invisible was pulling her forward, deeper and deeper into the dark end of the archive. No signs, no lights, only silence and dust. Then, she stopped. In the far corner, hidden behind broken shelves and covered with an old maintenance tarp, was a rusted doorway, not made from Novatech's usual polished metal, but something older, darker, with tribal symbols burned along the edges. Jira's eyes widened, her breath caught. She bent down and traced one of the marks with her fingers, whispering, "This is from my people." Hundreds of years ago, the door had no handle, no scanner, no lock she recognized. Yet when she placed her palm against it, the symbols glowed faintly. A soft mechanical sound echoed, and the door slid open, releasing a breath of cold air as, if it hadn't moved in centuries, behind it was a narrow stairway winding down into darkness. Jira hesitated, then stepped inside. The stairwell felt like a tunnel into the past, each step echoing softly as she descended. At the bottom she found a chamber, round and ancient, walls made of mixed stone and steel, half organic, half machine. In the center floated a black cube surrounded by a protective field, humming gently like it was breathing. The moment she entered, the cube pulsed, then spoke in a voice both metallic and warm. Identity confirmed, tribal code matched, access granted. Jira gasped and stepped closer. "Who are you?" The voice replied slowly. "I am Core 9, last guardian of the hybrid network, shut down during the collapse." She had heard stories about the collapse, an ancient war between human colonies and outer tribes long before Novatech existed, but those were just bedtime stories, weren't they? "Why am I here?" she asked softly. "Because your blood remembers what others forgot," the AI answered. "You carry the code. You walk with both machine and spirit. And this company stands on secrets built from your people's sacrifice." Jira's legs weakened. She sat down on the dusty floor, overwhelmed. "What secrets?" she asked, her voice trembling. The cube projected old images, Human scientists and tribal elders standing side by side, building machines with both code and spirit energy. Novatech's original purpose was peace, a bridge. But greed poisoned that dream. Your ancestors were erased from records, their symbols locked away. Jira stared in silence as scenes of betrayal flashed. Her people left behind, their tech stolen, names removed from databases. But I remember, said Core 9. And now, the virus they buried is waking again. It will eat Novatech from within. Only someone like you can stop it. She stood slowly, her fingers clenched around her pouch. Then teach me. Back in the control room upstairs, Riker stared at the screen showing the archive feed. It had gone black. Where is she? He asked his assistant. No signal, sir. She went below, into the hidden level. Riker didn't answer. He leaned back in his chair, staring at nothing, as if fighting with old memories. She found it faster than I expected, he whispered. Maybe too fast. Meanwhile, in the chamber, the cube floated lower toward Jira. To stop the virus, you must reactivate the tribal firewall. It lies hidden in the prime core beneath Novatech's central tower. But that area is locked, she said. Only Riker has access. Then show him the truth. Core 9 replied. Make him remember the promise his ancestors made to. Yours, the chamber began to vibrate gently and the cube dimmed. My power is fading. I waited too long. Take this key. A small glowing crystal floated toward her filled with shifting symbols. It holds the remaining code. It will guide you to the next step. Jira caught it with shaking hands, tears forming in her eyes. Her people weren't just storytellers. They were guardians, builders, heroes lost in time, and now she carried their legacy. As she returned up the ancient stairs, her lamp flickering, her heart no longer felt small. It burned with purpose, with anger, and with hope. Jira whispered, They mocked me because I wore old cloth. She gripped the crystal tightly, but I wear the truth. When the hidden door closed behind her, she didn't know Narix had followed the silent alerts, nor that he had seen the stairwell close. He narrowed his eyes from the shadows, a smirk returning to his lips. So, the tribal girl has secrets, he murmured. Let's see what the boss says when I reveal them first. The glowing crystal in Jira's hand felt warm, like it was alive. As she stepped out of the hidden stairwell and into the main archive again, her mind was spinning. The Rio AI, the Core 9, had spoken in her language, remembered her people's codes, and showed her truths no history book ever mentioned. She had always been told that her tribe lived in the wild corners of space, simple, forgotten, unimportant. But now, she knew the truth. They were the first ones to build the firewall that protected the galaxy from the virus. And now, that virus was waking again. Jira walked fast, heading straight for the executive elevator that led to the upper tower. She had to tell Riker. He had to see what she saw, but as the elevator rose, something strange happened. The crystal in her hand flickered, and a soft voice whispered, not in sound but directly in her mind, They will fear you. They will try to stop you. But do not let go. She clutched it tighter, her jaw set with new resolve. Riker stood by the tall window in his office when the door slid open. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing as he saw the dirt on her hands, the glow in her pouch, and the crystal shining in her fingers. You found it, he said, not surprised. More like he had been waiting. Jira stepped forward. You knew? I hoped, he replied. But no one has entered that level for over 200 years. Until now. She placed the crystal on his desk, and it floated into the air, spinning gently. Symbols appeared around it. Tribal code and machine language. Woven together in perfect harmony, Riker's eyes followed the floating runes, his voice softer now. My grandfather spoke of this. He called it the ghost key. He said our company owed everything to people who were erased from records. Jira's voice trembled. That was my people. Riker nodded. I believe you. Then he turned serious again. But if this crystal reactivated the ancient AI, then we have little time. That AI doesn't just remember the virus, it was built to stop it. Which means the virus is back. Before they could speak further, the lights flickered and a red glow pulsed. Through the room, a voice from the ceiling speakers echoed loudly. Core breach in Sector 7, containment failure. Emergency protocols engaged. Riker's face darkened. It started. He grabbed the crystal and looked at Jira. You're coming with me. They rushed through the tower's inner halls, past shocked workers and flickering consoles. Jira noticed something strange. Whenever they passed a security scanner, it flashed green for Riker. And also for her. You added my code to the system? She asked. Riker replied quickly. I didn't. Your key did. They arrived at a sealed control room, guarded by 2 armored drones. Riker stepped forward. This room houses Core Prime, the deepest layer of Novatech's network. No one has accessed it since the founders built it. Shira's heart raced. Then why now? Riker turned to her, voice low and grim. Because the virus wants to reach it. If it does, it'll take over every Novatech system across the galaxy. Drones, factories, weapons, everything. He placed the crystal into the panel. It fit perfectly, like it had always been meant for that slot. The door opened with a heavy hiss, and inside was something neither of them expected. A vast circular chamber with no ceiling, no floor, just layers of spinning code suspended in the air. Floating in the middle was a giant black sphere, cracked and glowing from inside, like a dying sun, and, embedded within it, was another AI core much older than Core 9. Jira stepped closer, but before she could speak, the sphere's surface shimmered, and an image appeared. It was not a hologram, but a face, not a human, not an alien, but something. Between both, the being's voice echoed deep and smooth. I am the first firewall, the last protector, and the virus has already entered. Jira trembled. Can you stop it? The AI shook its head. Not alone. My layers were weakened over time. The virus hid in your systems for centuries. It used your greed, your pride, your silence. Riker stepped forward. Then what do we do? The AI looked directly at Jira. You carry the hybrid key. Your voice can restore me, but only if you are willing to connect fully. Jira hesitated. What happens if I do? You will see all memories, all pain, all betrayal. You will feel what was lost, and you will become the bridge between what was and what must be. Her fingers touched the edge of the core, and suddenly, her mind exploded with light. She saw visions. Her ancestors building the firewalls, coding with their hands, carving machines with spirit symbols. She saw humans beside them working together, trusting, creating something beautiful. Then she saw betrayal, a secret project, stolen data, the tribes left behind, and blamed, erased. From history, she felt it all. The loss, the silence, the rage, but deeper still, she felt hope. The machines hadn't forgotten her people. They had been waiting for someone to return who could speak both languages again. When she opened her eyes, the core was glowing brightly, healed, whole again. The virus's red glow faded, the alarms silenced, and the spinning code slowed into peace. Riker looked at her with awe. You did it? Jira smiled faintly, exhausted. We did it. But in the shadows of the main control tower, Narek stood watching the security feed he hacked, his eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. So she is the key, he whispered. Then maybe it's time I used that for myself. Novatech's core prime chamber was still glowing with gentle blue light. Jira stood silently in the center, her hand resting on the reawakened firewall AI, its surface now calm and steady. She was tired, her mind buzzing with memories that weren't hers. Ancient knowledge, forgotten betrayals, faces of ancestors long gone. Riker stood beside her, staring at the security monitors as green bars replaced the red ones one by one. Systems are stabilizing, he said, almost in disbelief. You've brought the firewall back online. Every terminal in the building is responding to it. Jira nodded slowly. But it's not over. She looked toward the core, which pulsed again with faint warning. The virus was weakened, it said, but not destroyed. A part of it remains, small, hidden, waiting. In another room of Novatech's sprawling tower, someone else had heard those words. Someone who wasn't supposed to be listening. Narek sat in a darkened office, eyes fixed on a stolen feed from the core chamber, his hands trembling slightly with excitement. They trusted her with the key, he whispered, and she gave it power. A second screen in front of him glowed red. Administrative override request, accepted. Using a backdoor he had secretly built months ago, just in case he ever needed leverage, Narek was now inside the system, inside the old pathways where the virus once lived, and he wasn't alone. A cold voice whispered from the terminal. You seek control, we seek rebirth. Let us show you how. Narek smiled. Let's do it. Together. Back in the main chamber, Riker and Jira returned to the control floor, where engineers and AI assistants rushed to secure each sector. Jira handed the crystal to a systems analyst who looked at it like it was holy. You're a legend now, the engineer said with awe. No one's ever spoken to the firewall and survived. But you did more than survive. You bonded with it. Jira shook her head. Humbly, I'm just a voice. The truth was always there, waiting to be heard. Riker looked toward the skyline outside, the sun slowly rising beyond the towers. But just as peace seemed to return, boom! The lights flickered violently, alarms blared again, and this time, it wasn't just a sector failing, the entire building shook. A red warning flooded every screen. Unauthorized access detected. Internal breach origin. Executive Tier 2. Riker froze. That's Narek's level. Jira's heart skipped. I thought he was suspended, Riker snarled. He must have bypassed the system, and now the virus is using him. In the control tower, Narek stood completely still as his eyes glowed faint red. The virus had partially merged with his mind, using him as a carrier. He wasn't fully infected, but he wasn't fully Narek's anymore. Either his voice became mixed with a robotic echo. Your firewall woke up too early, but no matter, we adapt. He raised his palm and a nearby drone suddenly turned hostile, its eye glowing red, ready to attack. All across the building, other drones flickered, hesitated, then switched to combat mode. The virus had found its way back in. Riker slammed a TA code into the console, locking the main floor and sealing Jira inside with him. We have to disconnect the drone network, he said, before they reach the firewall core. Jira looked at him. But we don't know where the virus is. Hiding now. It's using Narek's to move unseen. She stepped forward, placing her hand on the system interface again. I need to speak to the firewall, she whispered. It still remembers what must be done. Inside her mind, the voice of the ancient AI returned. The virus is rebuilding its nest. It cannot spread unless it merges with the prime hub. You must cut the line. Jira asked, but that would shut down Novatech's systems across the galaxy. Only for a moment, the AI answered. But if you wait too long, the virus will evolve. Back in reality, Riker's face was pale. Shut down Novatech? That's millions of systems, customers, ships, satellites. Jira looked at him with steady eyes. And if we don't, the virus will use all of them. He hesitated, then nodded. Do it. She lifted the crystal again and spoke the code her ancestors once used to seal corrupted machines. As she spoke the final word, the screens across Novatech went black. Every system paused. Every drone froze. Every red light died. A deep silence fell over the entire city. And then, one by one, blue lights returned, clean, calm, safe. But Narek screamed in his chamber, the virus tearing itself away from him in burning shards of red light. He collapsed unconscious, smoke rising from his fingers, and somewhere deep inside the building, a cold voice whispered, "We were not finished." Later that evening, the building was quiet again. Only a few techs walking the halls as cleanup crews restored the last broken systems. Riker sat across from Jira in the central garden, a rare place of peace in the company. You didn't just save Novatech, he said. You saved what it was meant to be. Jira looked up at the stars, her pouch glowing faintly. No, she said softly. I only helped it remember. 1 week later, the Novatech tower stood calm once again, Its walls polished, its light steady, its systems fully restored, but inside, things were no longer the same. Jira, once mocked for her tribal clothes and quiet voice, was now the most spoken name across departments, cities, even star systems. Her story had spread faster than the virus ever could. The tribal girl who saved the core. The alien who spoke to machines older than time, the one who stopped the virus alone. In the lobby, where she was once laughed at, employees now stood when she passed, bowing slightly, some even placing a hand over their chest in her tribe's greeting sign. Narix, who had returned from medical recovery, now worked quietly at the lower assistant station, no longer smug, no longer smirking. He never looked her in the eye, and she never asked him to. In the upper floors, Riker stood in front of the executive council, human and alien members all present. He tapped a file onto the table, and Jira's image appeared, standing in front of the firewall, crystal in hand. She didn't just repair our systems, Riker said. She reminded us what Novatech was built to be, a bridge between worlds, not a tower above them. He looked around the room, voice steady. And for that, I recommend we create a new role. Chief Cultural Technic Officer. Someone who understands both spirit and system. A silence filled the room, then slow nods. The vote was unanimous. Later that day, Riker met Jira on the rooftop garden, the city glowing below them. He handed her a small device, a badge with her name and her new title engraved in 2 languages, corporate and tribal. Jira looked at it quietly, then said, "You don't need to give me this." Riker replied, "I'm not giving it. You earned it." She smiled slightly. "Then I'll wear it with honor, but not instead of my beads." He laughed. "Fair enough." Her first public appearance came days later at the Galactic Technology Unity Conference. Delegates from hundreds of planets attended, their eyes fixed on the main stage where Jira stood alone. No fancy clothes, no glittering jewelry, just her traditional wrap, her pouch, and her clear voice. She told them the story, not just of the virus or the AI core, but of the forgotten bridges, of how tribes were erased, of how silence almost destroyed them all. "But," she said, lifting her grandmother's pouch, "this small item saved a galaxy-wide company, not because it was powerful, but because it reminded me who I was. If you forget your roots, no system will protect you." The room went silent, not out of confusion, but deep respect. And then, applause like thunder filled the hall, rising higher than the building itself. Across the galaxy, people began wearing Jira-style beads on their wrists, a sign of remembrance, a way to say, "I honor the past while walking into the future." In her home village on the green moon of Cora, the elders watched her speech with pride. Children pointed at the screen, whispering, "She was one of us. She still is one of us." Back at Novatech, the firewall was stable, stronger than ever. The ancient AI, now fully awake, had integrated with the new systems, and it often spoke only to Jira when problems arose. "You are not just a guardian now," it once told her. "You are a part of the code." Even Narix, once bitter, finally left a quiet message in her inbox. "I was wrong. You didn't belong here because of what you wore. You belonged here because of who you are. Thank you for saving us, even those of us who didn't deserve saving." Jira didn't reply, but she saved the message. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't need words, only understanding. One evening she returned to the hidden stairwell, the one behind the archive shelf, and sat in the ancient chamber where she had first met Core 9. The cube floated gently again, its hum peaceful. "You've done well," it said. "The virus sleeps now, but you must always stay ready for new threats and new choices." Jira nodded, placing her hand gently on the cube. "I'll be ready." She stood, dusted her wrap, and looked at the ceiling, where stars were painted in glowing colors, and she whispered, "To the ones who were forgotten, you are remembered. You are honored. Through me, your voice lives on." In that moment, deep within the heart of a company once built on silent lies, a new legend was born. Not of fire, not of war, but of truth, courage, and a girl who never forgot who she was, once mocked, now honored, forever legendary.